Obviously, electricity prices have gone up 21%.
Well, you know, it's going to, because we're not fracking, we don't have domestic energy security, we've made no efforts whatsoever to secure domestic energy security. We're completely reliant on imports, bringing wood chips over from America to burn, creating more CO2, if you believe in that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, if you have an electric car, we're completely dependent on one form of energy. It's completely ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. They're expensive, they run out of battery, you can't charge them, they're sad. You know, I'm sorry, yeah, I just think they are a con. In answer to your question, yes, electric cars are a con.
People keep saying that, they keep talking about carbon, and the fact that when you're driving one, you're not giving off all those emissions at source. Can I say at source? Because to get the electricity, we don't know where it's coming from or how it's being produced.
Well, normally coal or gas, actually, and normally imported coal or gas. But actually, even if you believe that CO2 causes climate change, human-caused climate change, actually, electric vehicles are not the best thing because they actually use more CO2 in actually making them. They're heavier. It takes, I think you have to drive about 60 or 70,000 miles for them to be any better for the environment. And as you say, how do we get the electricity to actually make them? Because it's not from renewables. We can't store wind turbine renewable energy. You'd need a mountain of batteries for 1 day of electricity from wind turbine energy and 50 billion quid a year for 1 year to store it. It's an absolute joke. The whole thing is a con.
Well, we're told, though, that we need to scrap our current cars, which obviously run on petrol and diesel. We know about the emissions that come from these cars.
Yeah.
We're told that we should scrap them eventually and everything will be going towards the electric route.
But why?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, why? When the CO2 emissions, as I say, even if you believe in it, are actually higher for electric vehicles. And, you know, you were talking earlier about charging them, 30 minutes on a rapid charger. You know, if we're in a hurry and it takes, what, 5 minutes to fill the tank? And you can do it whenever you want. What about people that don't have a driveway? What about the vast majority of working class people and poor people that don't have a garage? What about them? Well, we know Sadiq Khan doesn't actually think they should be driving because he said actually quite recently it won't affect poor people in London because they don't drive. You know, because poor people aren't supposed to drive, they're just supposed to be plebs and walk around according to certain people in power. No, everyone deserves the right to have personal autonomy, and that comes from having a vehicle.
Well, there's a lot of people that are saying, sort of pulling the praises of these cars and saying that it's so quiet and there's no emissions coming from the car itself. I mean, the streets, there'll be those who would argue, so those who suffer with things like asthma, and if you go to parts in London, especially, or in big cities like Manchester and Leeds, where there's a lot of environmental pollutants, that you know, the carbon monoxide coming from these cars,
I completely agree.
That's a benefit to that environment.
Absolutely, and pollution is a completely separate argument. But actually, with research and development that can be put into petrol and diesel vehicles, the most modern, up-to-date petrol and diesel vehicles have hardly any emissions whatsoever in terms of carbon monoxide and other things like that. So, no, that's I completely agree with you in that. And Car 26, we're anti-pollution and we're pro-health. But we don't believe that CO2 is causing any damage to the environment, and we certainly don't believe that electric cars are the way forward, because you're burning coal and gas to make the electric to power the car. It's ridiculous.
Well, they're thinking that in time to come, that electricity would be generated by renewable sources.
Well, when that happens, and it may happen at some point in the future, that will evolve gradually, and that would be absolutely wonderful. But we're not there yet. We're nowhere near there, and putting any sort of limit like 2030 on it is absolutely moronic and disingenuous. You know, we're using more fossil fuels now than we ever have, and doing this big raid on all the gas and oil companies is disgusting, because basically it means that the cost of energy will ultimately go up. We're not using any less. Wind turbines need 100% gas backup all the time. They can't be recycled, like batteries can't be recycled. If you've got 30 million cars on the road and you've got 30 million cars on the road, you've got 20 million car batteries eventually, then they can't be recycled. They've got a 500,000 year lifespan to disintegrate. The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. It's financial, it's a money go round, and it's a scam.
So if that's the case, then how can we stop it? Is it possible to stop this so-called nonsense?
Yeah, we need to tell our MPs that there's absolutely no way that we want petrol and diesel cars to be scrapped by 2030, because, as I say, it'll only be the wealthy that can afford to have an electric vehicle. and normal people won't be able to. It's horrible. It just means there'll be an elite that are driving, and the rest of us, we can walk to the shops, we can do as we're told, and we can look at our screens and we can wait for our deliveries. That's the life. That is what they want, you know.